All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us for a special look today at what our restoration teams are doing out in the Gulf of Mexico. My name is Jamie. I am an ocean education specialist at the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History, and I'm going to be your host today. So we're going to get to talk to some of our friends. We're going to learn all about lionfish today, and they are out on a ship called the OSV Island Intervention. And the ship right now is located in the Gulf of Mexico in the Flower Garden Banks National Marine Sanctuary. We're so excited to have you all today. And we're going to get a kind of sneak peek at life at sea, as well as learn about kind of invasive species and what threats they pose to places like the Flower Garden Banks National Marine Sanctuary. So please feel free to share any questions you have or comments as they come to mind. We're going to pause throughout the show to kind of answer some of those questions. In just a few minutes, we're going to connect to the ship and we're going to connect to the scientists we're going to talk to today. But before we do that, I want us to give a little bit of context about why that they are out there and where they are. So let's check out what is underwater deep in the Gulf of Mexico. As you go deeper into the ocean, like this remotely operated vehicle you see here, less and less sunlight is able to penetrate the water. Eventually, you reach the mesophotic zone, which literally means middle light, and is sometimes referred to as the twilight zone. As you travel even deeper, you'll eventually reach a point where there is no sunlight at all. In addition to this change in light, the water also gets colder, and there's much higher pressure. Despite the low light, cold temperatures, and high pressure environment, there are incredible ecosystems that call the seafloor at these depths home. These deep sea ecosystems are found all over the world, including in the Gulf of Mexico, which is where all this beautiful footage is from. Colorful corals and sponges are the foundation of these ecosystems, providing the habitat for the many fish and invertebrates you're seeing on screen right now. There's still so much we have to learn about the deep sea because exploring these depths can be difficult and requires help from expensive and highly technical equipment, some of which we'll learn about more from our science team today. However, what we do know is that the deep sea is the largest habitat on Earth, and the number of species and abundance of life that depends on these deep sea habitats may rival colorful coral reefs found in shallow coastal waters or even tropical rainforests on land. Unfortunately, the Deepwater Horizon oil spill that occurred in April of 2010 dealt a heavy blow to Gulf of Mexico communities on land and at sea. 11 people lost their lives, and natural resources, wildlife, and habitats across the northern Gulf were severely impacted. Restoration is particularly challenging at these depths and habitats that were injured so far under the water are hard to reach, and we still don't know very much about them. As a result, 4 restoration projects are currently underway to help us better understand and restore these seafloor ecosystems found below 160 feet deep. These projects are mapping new areas and developing better maps of the seafloor in the Gulf of Mexico so we know where these coral habitats are found. They're learning more about the species that live in these habitats and how they may be connected across the Gulf of Mexico. They're learning and testing different methods to help corals grow and reproduce in the wild and in labs in order to help replace the corals that were injured by the oil spill. And they're working to reduce threats like lionfish that we're going to learn about today that these ecosystems face and connecting this restoration work to the public. This work is made possible by the Deepwater Horizon Open Ocean trustees and a number of partners, including a large number of academic institutions, non-governmental organizations, and 3 federal partners, including the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, the U.S. Geological Survey, and the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management. Something that makes this mission that they are on right now specifically cool and important is this mission is the first significant NOAA and Navy collaboration in the Gulf of Mexico, and is the deepest dive by humans for a NOAA science mission. And it's also the first time saturation diving has been used at sea for a NOAA mission. One of the goals of this mission is to use these Navy saturation divers to remove lionfish, because that is part of habitat restoration. And so today we're going to learn about lionfish and kind of what makes them invasive and how they can be harmful to mesophotic habitats in Flower Garden Banks National Marine Sanctuary. So let's meet some of our scientists and let's head over to the ship. So our ship, they are on the deck of the Island Intervention now. Hi, guys. Hello, everyone. Why don't each of you introduce yourself and like what you do on the ship?
What you do on the ship?
Hi, I'm Claire Mullaney, and I'm the Threat Reduction Coordinator for the Mesophotic and Deep benthic Restoration Project. I also, on this mission, am a data manager and also assisted in the logistical coordination of the mission as well.
Hi, I'm Josh Harvey. I'm part of the research team with Flower Gardens. I handle the mooring buoys and lionfish invasive species removal.
And I'm Marissa Nuttall. I'm the acting research coordinator for Flower Garden Banks National Marine Sanctuary, here helping with all sorts of data collection and also resource protection, looking at some potential anchor damage.
Amazing. So I think we're all here to learn about some lionfish and learn about kind of what that means. Can you tell us kind of the history of lionfish in the Gulf of Mexico and how they ended up here if they are invasive?
Well, as most people know, lionfish are throughout the Caribbean. They're an invasive species, and nobody really knows the exact location they were released. However, the Gulf Stream currents have just carried them all around all the different reefs that we see, from the Gulf of Mexico to the Caribbean, all through North America, even down into South America. So that's what some of this science is working to do, is still figure out where they come from, what the genus, species, different type of DNA and genetics. The scientists are working to figure those questions out.
Can you tell us a little bit about where their native range is? So they're not supposed to be in the Gulf of Mexico or the Caribbean. Where are they supposed to be?
They originate in the Indo-Pacific regions. They are not native, and so, but they're here to stay. And so we can try to work with them and figure out how we can take care of them.
Yeah. What necessarily makes lionfish dangerous to coral reefs like the Flower Garden Banks?
Well, they're gluttonous eaters. They even eat when they're not hungry. They're opportunistic feeders. So they'll continue to eat a lot of our juvenile fish populations, even though they don't need to. And so with no natural predators, they find themselves just always consuming some of these fish. So they're threatening some of the reefs. And as reefs are stressed, they're already in a state of duress. The lionfish just don't help that problem.
Yeah. Do lionfish serve any positive purpose to the ecosystem? You talked a little bit about how they're kind of here to stay. How do they work within the ecosystem if it's functioning correctly?
Well, that's we're still trying to figure some of that out, because in really healthy reef systems, we're seeing that with human interaction, as far as removals, derbies, and things like that, they're kind of keeping the populations in check, but our native fish are not going down. However, again, we talk about those stressed reefs, and with global warming and warmer ocean temperatures, we're finding that, they are actually just taking out some of those small fish populations.
I also just want to quickly add a more, sociological kind of positive effect that they might be having. The lionfish invasion, as we call it when we want to be, really make it hit home with people. I think it's garnered a lot of attention on the Gulf Coast and also in the Southeast. It's put a lot of focus on these sensitive coral reef habitats, and I think been a point for a lot of people to really connect with the issues that reefs are having, and then also shone a spotlight on reefs for scientific literature and study as well.
Yeah, they're an unlikely uniter. While they're not good for the environment, they've brought a lot of attention to the problems in the coral reef environment, and a lot of interest, and why you guys are even here listening to what we're talking about and exploring today.
Yeah. I've heard that you might have some lionfish to show us and maybe explore a little bit.
We do.
Can you briefly, before we pull those out, can you tell us how you guys have been catching these lionfish and maybe what makes this specific mission unique?
Yeah, so as Jamie touched on a little bit, on this mission, we're using Navy saturation divers to do a lot of tasks that help reduce threats to these sensitive and special mesophotic and deep benthic communities. And one of those tasks is to remove lionfish. So in shallow water, lionfish can be removed easily by civilian divers, and they use these devices that, you know, at some point you guys will check out on the table here, and you can see one on the video. It's called a zookeeper and a spear, just a simple pole spear. You can spear the lionfish, put it in the zookeeper to prevent the venomous spines, which my colleagues will talk more about here shortly, from hurting you. And, you know, you can pretty quickly remove those lionfish just as a single diver. On this mission, we're sending Navy saturation divers down to depths where those, you know, typical civilian divers can't usually go. So it's a really, really rare opportunity to be able to remove lionfish using this sort of common, well-tried method, you know, from depths where it's usually not able to be done, and, you know, help start to reduce that threat to mesophotic and deep benthic communities, while also collecting some of those lionfish, which we don't get to bring up to the surface very often, for data, so we can hopefully start to learn a little bit more about how they affect those communities, which we don't know a lot about at this point.
And part of the reason why you don't really know how these lionfish are affecting these specific communities, right, is because of the depth.
Yes, because of
right?
the depth. Yeah, and there has also been a lot of attention, you know, on the shallow reef communities. Those are the reefs, I think, that are just more popularly known in general. They're the reefs where, you know, most people go diving, they see the lionfish. But, you know, it's important to learn more about their effects on mesophotic and deep benthic communities as well. And we don't know a lot, as we said at this point, but it's possible that lionfish could be sort of taking refuge at those depths, although we don't, you know, have, I think, hard evidence for that at this point. And some of those lionfish that could be kind of taking refuge down there could be some of these larger females that are producing more lionfish. It's there's some possibilities that, you know, could be the case for the lionfish population, where it would be great to know, have more information about these communities and how lionfish affect them.
Yeah. So I think maybe we can take a look at some lionfish now that we have a little bit more context. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Sounds great.
So in fact, just today, our saturation divers were down in these really deep depths, and they were able to actually start some of these removals. And as you can see here, we were able to gather a really delightful specimen for you today. So one of the first things we look at with the lionfish is you'll notice these large spines sticking up. I know it's a common misconception, but everybody thinks they're poisonous. They're not. They're in fact venomous. There's 13 of these spines, and as you can see, I'm touching it because I'm not actually trying to poke myself or inject any venom or anything like that. The meat on these are perfect for human consumption. They're actually really delicious, but why we're here is the science. So what we're going to do is we're going to find out what this guy's been up to and what he's been eating. So one of the things we always like to look at is down in, and it does appear he has something inside. He must have just ate right before we got him. So we'll take a look at that further in depth. I'll have Marissa do it. But to do the science, we have several things we want to do. We're going to take a weight of the fish.
And is that a typical size of lionfish, or is that a big boy?
They come in the full spectrum. So this was one of the other ones that was also able to be gathered this morning. As you can see, they eat their size and smaller. So as they increase in size, the prey fish also becomes a bigger meal every single time. So it can affect all ranges across the reef. All righty, Marissa, we have 1230 as far as that's in grams. We measure them in grams. Now we're going to take two lengths, a standard length and a total length. And I'm going to get them right here on this fish board. Make sure the mouth is closed. We're going to go down to the caudal peduncle here. It's a really fun word, but it's one of the places we take the lengths from. And so right now I am showing a 3-4-1, and then the tail, we make sure it goes all the way out, all the way down, and I have a 4-4-5. So we'll take that. Marissa's logging that data because, like we said, at these depths, they're without light. They haven't really been examined before, and so this is some of the first of this scientific exploration that we're doing here. I'm going to let her take over, and she's going to open up the fish.
fin clips first?
Fin clips? Oh, we can do
Yeah,
fin clips too. So one of our partners in this cruise, because it's a huge collaboration, there's a lot of different people that are learning from this science during this restoration project. One of the things we do is we take fin clips. After we take the measurement, of course, that way we actually have the correct size of the fish. So she's going to use gloves. She's going to take that fin clip. I'm just going to hold the vial here for her.
What kind of other information are you going to get from these fin clips that you're taking?
So they're going to do genetics on them in the labs, and that can tell a lot of different things. Are they from just the flower gardens? Has some of this, the fish maybe migrated from different parts of the Caribbean? It's kind of like building a family tree. We want to know which part of the ocean they're from. Now they're down at these depths because we just don't know that much about them. Their recreational divers can't get to them. Are you ready, Marissa?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to give her just a minute. What she's going to do is we're going to first open up the fish. We need to determine the gender. We want to know if this is a breeding male or a spawning female. So I'm going to let her work on that for a minute. And like my colleague Claire said earlier, we have these zookeepers. We actually have these collaboration with the Navy team. They're down there. They've been doing science. They've been installing mooring buoys because we're establishing public access. All part of this restoration project. There is so much coming from it. In fact, the vessel we're on today, you can see we're sweating. It's one of the hottest days out here. This is an offshore support vessel. In the Gulf, we have tons of oil, gas infrastructure. Well, today they're scientists. So we're all taking part in this, and it's a really neat project. What do we got?
Okay. So if you guys want to zoom in a little bit, thank you very much. You guys can take a look. Just like any other animal, they have all of their organs in their body cavity. What we see right away here is this is actually a male. So what we're looking at are their reproductive organs. And if you can see my finger on the camera, I'm just going to trace along. That is one of the gonads, the spermatophore, so we know that this is a male lionfish. We can also see back here, this kind of white silvery item is the fish's swim bladder. So fish actually use air in order to control their buoyancy. So kind of like a scuba diver, they use that air to help them rise and sink in the water column. And you can see this is actually bubbled up right here. So just like a diver coming up from deep very quickly, they can suffer from what we call barotrauma, coming up too quickly, where the gas expands in that swim bladder and actually causes some damage. So that's what we're seeing with that big bubble here. Then the big thing that we're looking for today is its stomach.
Let me hold this right here for you. So with that barotrauma and with that swim bladder inflating, this fish was actually harvested at about 243 feet. That is so crazy and so deep. So it's really important that we establish these collaborations with other partners that have the ability to go that deep, where some of our scientists have yet to go, because now we're exploring areas that are completely new. We're sampling fish that we've never sampled before. We're just learning so much on a day-to-day basis out here. All right. Excellent. So I'm going to set him off to the side for just a second.
We got to grab his shrimp as well.
Yep.
In a minute. All right, so this here is the stomach of the lionfish. We just extracted it to make it a little easier for us to look at. So I'm just going to cut this open, and we're going to see what this fish has been eating over the last couple of hours.
And this is really important because when these species target more than one type of dinner, if you will, we need to know what species is being impacted by the lionfish. Are they primarily working on red night shrimp or brown chromis, which are two different shrimp and fish? We want to know.
All right, so this stomach is actually pretty empty for a lionfish. He was probably collected around noontime, and so they primarily feed in the morning and night. So what we have here is one partially digested fish. So we call this chyme. At this point, we're not really able to identify it just by looking at it visually. We can tell it's a fish. We can see all that tissue and some of the bony parts. So we know it's a fish. So what we can actually do from this point is preserve these samples and test them genetically to try and identify what species this individual was eating. But we also have a shrimp that is still in its mouth to retrieve as well.
Are they ever eating things that we like to eat? I like to eat shrimp.
Yes. And I believe at one point, lionfish have been found to have 16 different species in one belly contents. So, again, the scientists have done this. We can do all sorts of things, such as fillets for ciguatera testing. We can do Again, the fin clips for genetics. We do the species identification for stomach contents, as well as the testing for to make sure they're safe for human consumption, because humans are the natural predator of this species. It takes a lot of good people out there trying to do a lot of good things with the research and everything like that in order to understand more so that we can protect our reef populations.
Right,
Look at that. We have several things in there.
Yeah, sounds several things right in his gullet that are more partially digested. And so these are all actually fish. We have a little bit more intact, but again, so digested that it's going to be a little hard to identify. By its body shape, we're probably looking at some kind of wrasse fish. And it looks like there's several of them. You guys can see that.
And so when we do this, we also want to measure the stomach contents. We want to know what size of prey in comparison to the size of the fish that we're dealing with here. So that one looks to be about 5 centimeters. We get this lined up here. This one is 6.5. And this one is 4.5. So we had a 5, 6.5, and a 4.5. That's very important to document. Again, in comparison, you see this is a very large lionfish. They absolutely consume so much all over the reef. Let's see, their mouth will expand so open. If anybody's familiar with like a lot of the lakes and tributaries around Texas or Gulf regions, there's a largemouth bass. These mouths somewhat emulate that. They can absolutely attack prey just left and right. Do we have any questions or anything like that? Does anybody have anything on their mind they want to ask us about?
Can I ask what people, this is a very big threat. It feels like a very big threat to the reefs and things like that. What are some things that people can do? Like average people who maybe like aren't out there spearfishing.
You can take that.
Did you say average people that aren't out there spearfishing, Jane?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think
maybe one thing is
one idea that immediately comes to my mind is just because the effects of lionfish on these reefs kind of like synergistically interact with a lot of other threats to reefs. Even, if you can't directly impact the lionfish population, there's other things that you as an individual can do, like, for example, all the things that you may have heard, like choosing sustainable seafood, like using reusable items. But I also think it's important to not place too much of the burden of, reef degradation on the individual. I guess voting when you can, and, using your dollar to choose what companies you want to purchase things from, to try to hopefully make an impact on that larger scale as well.
If you see them on the menu, order them. That's something anybody can do. And now you're supporting the local hunters that are out there gathering a sustainable resource. Because they're invasive, they're overpopulated. That means they're a food source that's not impacting the other ones that have been threatened. So you can order them on the menu.
And I think the other great story that lionfish tell to the average person who might not be out here spearing it is that these guys are a kind of tale of the ultimate invader that we put there. So the main theory on how they got into their non-native range where they're not supposed to be is through releases by humans. They're beautiful fish. People love to have them in their aquarium. However, they eat everything. And so the primary theory is that people would have them in their aquariums, they'd eat everything, they'd go, I don't want this fish anymore, I'm going to release it to the wild. And so they were released through the Caribbean. Enough of them met up that they created a sustainable population. So even, your red-eared slider pet at home, if you don't want to have it as a pet anymore, you need to rehome it. Don't go releasing your pets back into the wild.
Also, tuning in. It really does help getting the education and the outreach out there. It's wonderful. We can spread the word because someone may not know, and now you have the information to tell them.
And I also, just as a last point, Jamie, sorry, I want to add that at this point, lionfish they're unfortunately not available widely across the U.S. as a menu item. That's sort of a goal we've been working towards for a long time, is, getting enough of a fishery that we can serve them, more broadly beyond the Gulf Coast. So I guess be ready for when that happens. Get to eat out and order lionfish.
Yeah. So I'm assuming that you guys have all done your fair share of lionfish gut contents analysis. What is some of the interesting things? What is one of the more interesting things you found in a lionfish gut? Anything surprisingly large or anything surprisingly weird?
So I haven't done quite as many lionfish dissections, I don't think, as Josh and Marissa. And most of my lionfish dissection experience is from a good number of years ago. But something that sticks out to me from a recent dissection I did on a lionfish caught in the Gulf of Mexico was an extremely large, like almost looked like into the human eating size red night shrimp, very perfectly preserved, seemed to have like just entered the stomach. And that was a pretty cool find, because before that I had mostly found like really digested things, very tiny things, but it's cool to find like a fish that looks like it was just taken out of the ocean.
For me, there's not a lot of things that startle me, but I was harvesting a fish that we were doing science on the back deck of the boat, and another fish happened to exit the mouth of the lionfish, and I was not prepared for that. So that one sticks out very vividly in my memory.
Yeah, and I think my most memorable one is actually a lionfish that we removed. I believe it was 13 individual fish from its guts. It had obviously just been on a bit of a feeding frenzy. And so lots and lots of little individual fish that we extracted from it. I think that's kind of our biggest find so far.
Yeah, I've got some questions coming in from the chat. Robert would like to know if they can be targeted with hook and line.
Hook and line. I know there's been a lot of really good anglers out there that have made attempts, but I know there are some sporadic success stories, but it seems to be that the hand spear and human interaction that way seems to be the most effective. But if somebody does figure out a way to do that, that would be wonderful.
Yeah. I'm not super well versed in it, but as far as I know, they don't tend to go for hook and line bait like, you know, potentially other species on the reef do. So you're more likely to catch a native fish instead of an invasive one, if that's what you're going for.
I guess when you eat everything, it's really hard to target a bait type that they would like. Mikey would like to know, what colors can lionfish be? So the ones on your table seem to be like a dark maroon. Are there any other colors? Is that diagnostic with the species?
They have a wide spectrum, but what we've seen is as the fish grows in size, it becomes darker and darker. And a lot of times when we're spearing these fish, anything below 30 feet deep in the water, you lose that sort of color of red. If we look here, we'll see a lighter shade in the smaller fish, and the larger fish, again, it gets more of that deep pigment.
Cool.
They also, I don't know if you guys can tell, but they get a lot more of these spines on their cheeks the larger they get. So you can see on the smaller one, it has like some of those cheek spines, but the larger one, sometimes it's almost painful if you grab them in the wrong area of the mouth. They have these like very spiky spines on the exterior of their cheeks.
You know, and as always, you want to be real careful handling them. You'll see me, a lot of people do wear gloves. These really worry me. A lot of these spines I just stay away from completely. These right here, they will surprise you. And so that's why I hold the fish by the bottom jaw. But again, if you're not familiar with them, always use extra caution around them because the stings do hurt.
Earlier, you did say that they are not poisonous, they are venomous. Will you explain the difference a little bit and
absolutely.
why you said that?
If you think of a bee sting, that's a venom. So protein based, will break down in hot water. It's poison is something like more ingested and not meant to be there. The venom is naturally occurring. So it just has a reaction to the body. Some people have allergic reactions to bees. Some people have allergic reaction to lionfish venom. That's why when you're at depth and you're sparing them, if you have that kind of contact, you got to be aware. It's really just important.
I think really another good way to distinguish between poisonous and venomous is poisonous has to be ingested, whereas venomous, you have to be poked or stabbed and the venom is injected into you.
Perfect. Thank you, Marissa. Yes, absolutely.
Gotcha. I have one more question in the chat, and it's, what is their temperature range? I'm assuming, like, what is their temperature range in their native habitat? Is that different here? Yeah, go ahead.
I don't have the exact numbers up in my brain, but another thing that made the lionfish such a successful invader is because it was so hardy in so many ways. And one of those ways is temperature. They have a very wide temperature range in which they can not only survive, but, you know, thrive and live comfortably. And I don't know, I would love to potentially get those numbers for you, but I don't have them at the moment. I can maybe look them up really fast and get back to you later in the broadcast.
They're incredibly resilient. Like I said, with the mesophotic depths that we're working on out here, we're finding them congregating around any type of structure, all the way up to our shallow reef caps that recreational divers go to. Wide spreads, but they are extremely resilient to large changes that other organisms are not.
Yeah. We have one more question. Speaking of the venom, they use that venom as a defense, right? That's a defense mechanism.
Yes, they do. And in fact, like for the females that spawn, when they release those egg sacs, they float up to the surface. They're encased in that venom. Therefore, migratory birds that want to feed on them aren't able to ingest them. It makes them travel to so many different places on so many different parts of the Gulf. That's part of the problem, is trying to figure out how to get around that and how to beat that.
And just another, to add like a bit more information to that, they do use it as a defense mechanism. They don't hunt with their spines. One mechanism lionfish actually use for hunting, so they're ambush predators, so they lay in wait for a prey fish to get close. They sometimes actually use jets of water to lure a prey fish in, and then they can suck them into their very large mouths. But yeah, those spines are typically not involved in prey hunting.
Yeah, very much defensive.
Yes.
They have a little vacuum mouth.
And I think we might have, Jamie, if we have a second, temperature range.
Yeah, please.
50 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Yeah, so they can live in 50 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit, which is why they not only were able to kind of, populate the Gulf of Mexico, the Caribbean, the Southeast Atlantic, but have now been spotted farther up the East Coast as well, just because of that wide temperature range.
That is pretty wide. I don't know that I want to get into 50-degree water, so
I don't.
Definitely not without extra equipment. No.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for your time. And thank you to the audience for your questions. We have one more question, just really quick. They want to know, what do lionfish attack with their venom, or like who are their predators? So I'm assuming that in the Gulf, they don't have as many as in their native range.
Yeah, so they're using their venom and their spines primarily for protection for themselves against predators. So these guys, as Claire mentioned, they like to kind of lay in wait and a little bit of ambush predators. So when the divers, you've seen some of the video clips, are approaching them to spear them, these fish don't run away. They actually can manipulate their spines and they kind of point them in the direction of the diver or whoever is threatening them. So you see this diver gets real close in the video clip and is able to spear the lionfish. But that lionfish the whole time is essentially pointing its spines at the diver as a hey, get away from me. So that's what they're primarily utilizing those spines for. In terms of what their predators are, primarily right now, it's just humans. There are some anecdotes about native species potentially eating them, and we have some really cool studies going on at the moment looking at predation of lionfish with these really special tags that we're putting in the lionfish that will let us know when that fish has been eaten by another fish. But that is up and coming.
Amazing. We'll get to one last question. And that is, what do they taste like? Josh, I think you said you'd had some before.
I have. If you're familiar, a white, flaky, almost like red snapper. Ceviche, blackened, or in my belly. I love them any way I can.
They're super delicious, as Josh said, like delicious, mild whitefish. They're really good for people who kind of have a little bit of an aversion to fish. They don't taste very fishy, extremely mild. Yeah, able to be put in all kinds of dishes. Marissa, I don't know. Yes, that's right. Marissa is a vegetarian.
Awesome. Well, okay. Again, thank you guys so much for your time. I learned a lot today. I learned about that. That was so cool to see that swim bladder. And thank you to the audience for tuning in. This is the first live feed program for this cruise, and we have a couple more coming up. So if you like today's event, check out the Inner Space Center's YouTube page, and we're gonna post the link in the chat, I believe, to see about upcoming live feed opportunities. And also, if you're just interested more about restoration and restoration of the Gulf of Mexico. We're also going to post a link to different publications and story maps and different updates about these projects. So thank you guys again for your time.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you all so much for tuning in. It was great to be able to talk more about lionfish.
Thanks, everyone.